Hey YouTube, Michael here again. So I know last week I said in my Stormlight Archive video that I had read all of Mistborn as well, but that was a very slight white lie because I was in the process of reading The Bands of Mourning, which was the last book I had to read for Mistborn. Anyway, so this week I finished that, and I also read all of the expanded material, the short stories, novellas, except for Allomancer Jack, because honestly, I didn't care about those parts in the books, and I didn't really care to read more of them. Sorry, Brandon. But I read everything else. I read all the books and Secret History and what was the other one? The one from the one with Gimel and Kelsier. So I'm gonna split the video up into obviously the two eras, and then maybe at the end I'll talk a little bit about the expanded material. For context, my thoughts on the Era 1 books might be a little bit hazier because they were the first books I started with when I started reading fantasy again a good 3 or 4 months ago. So I do have notes, so I should be, more or less on topic. Let's get started with Era 1. Sorry, thought that was my dog. It seemed like a good chance that I would like it, and it was short. It was only 3 books, so I knew I wouldn't be investing months of my life to it. So when I picked up the Final Empire, or just Mistborn, whatever they want to call it now, the first book, I wasn't immediately convinced. Honestly, even all the way through when I finished it, I really wasn't convinced until about a quarter of the way through book 2. I thought getting through book 1, I wasn't not into it. I didn't dislike it. It wasn't bad, but I wasn't I hadn't fallen in love yet. I don't know, I had the feeling that there was more to the world that I wasn't seeing, but I just couldn't see what it was. And now I know that that's the Cosmere, and I kind of want to go back and reread it with the context and knowledge that I have now. But I'm going to give myself a little bit more space before I try that. Some of the issues I had at first, at least with the first book, the world, Scadriel, I did find it it wasn't a world I wanted to live in. Clearly, I don't think anybody would really want to live in the Lord Ruler's Final Empire with the ash mounts and the brown plants, and it just seems really unpleasant. So I wasn't drawn in by the world immediately. The magic system was cool, but it seemed a little basic at first. I was proven wrong on that count later on in the sequels, but it didn't. None of it immediately was enough of a hook to really get me into the book throughout. I liked the characters well enough, but I didn't feel like a lot of them got any had enough time to really develop in the first book. Anyway, I'm rambling on too long about the first book because the next 2 books floored me. I love them. They are fantastic. Well of Ascension might be my favorite of them, but that's mostly because I really actually enjoyed the way Brandon wrote the kind of faux political drama with the council. Sorry, trying to avoid spoilers. I guess the word council is not much of a spoiler. I guess I've kind of gotten the impression that some people didn't enjoy those parts of the story. I did. I will admit it wasn't the most intricate political drama plot, but I don't think that's necessarily what Brandon was trying. I think it got the message across, basically showing Elend was out of his depth in this new world that he had inserted himself into as an authority. And because Elend is, one of my favorite characters, not my favorite, but I do wish we saw more from him. He got a decent chunk, and you saw more from him as the series went on, but I felt like he could have been a little bit more front and center as a character, but maybe that's because, he's the generic white protagonist and he's the self-insert, so maybe for me, maybe that's all. Because I loved Vin too. Vin is... Whew! I'm a big fan of Vin's tenacity and ferociousness. Brandon did a fantastic job showing that she grew up in do or die situations where you made choices or choices were made for you, and that comes through in the way she deals with people, the way she negotiates, and very much in the way she fights. It's fantastic and I love it. She is one of the best realized protagonists I've read up until I would say Brandon's work in Stormlight Archive is a little bit better, but I hadn't read those yet, and so I was in love with his work with Vin. She's definitely one of his top tier protagonists so far, at least. I'm working on Warbreaker now, so we'll see how I feel about Ciri. I think try not to get into too many spoilers, so I don't have a lot to say about book 2 and 3 specifically, because a lot of what's important is plot specific, but I do want to talk about, especially in the last 2 books, Brandon's exploration of the importance of faith and the variance therein among different peoples. But I find that his exploration of faith, as personally, as an atheist, I found beautiful and fascinating because he's very open-minded. It's not in any way shoving any kind of ideology down your throat other than one of openness and curiosity and acceptance. If you want to believe that can be shoved down your throat, then maybe that. But other than that, it's honestly that aspect of the trilogy, time and time and again, and specifically with the one character whose entire arc is based around that, I found was the main compelling reason for me coming back to continue reading the books. I read them really quickly. It didn't take me long because Brandon's books are easy to tear through. But that specific character, those of you who've read it, trying not to spoil anything, those of you who read it and know who I'm talking about, that is, to date, probably my favorite character in the Cosmere. I love him specifically because of his arc. I think that ending that he gets, it's really rare to find an arc for a character that justifies that specific ending, but he does it with him. The other one, maybe not so much. It didn't bother me too much. I liked it, but it worked with him. He deserved it, and I loved it. I love him with every fiber of my being. That character is the best thing Brandon Sanderson has written for me, personally at least. As for Era 2, I didn't love it so much. I read the first book. Originally, my intention was to go from reading Mistborn Era 1 to reading Stormlight Archive, and then come back to read Era 2 when I was done with that. But when I finished The Hero of Ages, I was just like, I needed to see what happened next on that world, even if I wasn't going to get to see the same characters. So I was like, all right, screw it, because I had all the books anyway on my Kindle, so I just started reading Era 2. And so I read the first book. And it was all right. I liked the first book well enough. I saw the potential in it for something like a cool magic cowboy detective series where, he's solving different mysteries every book, and he kind of did that. But when you get to the second book, his attempt at that just kind of falls flat. The second book, and I'm trying not to be mean here because I think Brandon might be my new favorite author, so I'm trying not to disparage his works, but I think, Shadows of Self might be the worst Brandon Sanderson book I've read. I barely got through it. I hated the villain. None of the characters, the main characters, I really felt like in the first two Era 2 books were very interesting, with the exception of Wayne. Obviously, most people I think would at least get some enjoyment out of Wayne. Some people might find him a little annoying, but I do think he's probably the best developed character in those first two books. The other characters, the main character Wax and Marasi and Steris, in the first two books, Marasi's okay. I don't mind her. Wax is fine. He's kind of bland. He doesn't feel like a protagonist. He's just, I follow the law, I shoot the gun, I'm good at shooting the gun. Bang, 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 bang. And that's like, it's cool. The action's still well written. Brandon's writing is always good. So for the most part, especially the first book more so than the second book, it's still enjoyable. They're good reads. The second book is still good. It's not terrible, but it's not up to par with the rest of Brandon's work. Speaking of which, when I read the second book, I was just like, no, I was kind of done. I was like, all right, I need to read something that I've heard is better. I didn't go on to The Bands of Mourning. I put that down for a minute and started reading Stormlight Archive. So I just finished that, and now we're back to here. It's a little bit ironic that I stopped before Bands of Mourning, because Bands of Mourning is by far the best book of the three so far. To the point where I'm actually now excited for the fourth book. I can't remember what it's supposed to be called. But whenever it's coming out, probably not for a little while, but I am very excited to read it, because the third book, Bands of Mourning, especially the last 40-50% of it, floored me. He just does things in that book that I was like, you shouldn't be able to do that and make it convincing, but it works because he realized, some of the limitations he had set on himself previously in that world allowed for some, more playful twists in the narrative, and I enjoyed it. And the amount you learn about Scadriel as a whole is fantastic, and through that I learned about Mistborn Secret History, and through that you learn, when you read his Secret History, you learn quite a bit about the Cosmere, which I was very glad, because I do enjoy reading and learning about this universe that he's creating. This is getting pretty long, so I'll just say a couple words about the short stories. The one from the tabletop game is pretty basic. I get that it's supposed to be like an introduction to the world, and it probably does that very effectively. since I didn't need an introduction to the world, I just kind of read like an alternate chapter 1 for the Final Empire. Secret History I found really interesting in more of a scholastic sense because, like I said, I really enjoyed reading about the Cosmere, but narratively it is a little bit disjointed, and he even says it in the preface to the story in Arcanum Unbounded that it is a little bit of a disjointed story because it takes place over such a long period of time, but it was well worth it for the information you get. It is a little bit exposition-y and info dumpy, but that doesn't bother me so much as long as it's not the entire thing and it's still Brandon, so it's not excessive in the amount of information he gives you. He still only gives you what he wants. So Mistborn, as of right now, I'd still say I probably enjoy as a concept, or on a more surface level, I enjoy the world of Mistborn more than I enjoy Roshar, because I absolutely love what he's doing with the idea of a fantasy world adapting and using its magic to create advanced technology. I mean, even the stuff he does with the kind of steam power of Era 2 is absolutely fascinating, and I kind of wish he would do more with that, and he started to in Book 3. And so I'm very, very interested in seeing the more modern Era 3 and Era 4, whenever those come. Like, that's a concept that is just inherently gripping to me, and I think Brandon also is one of the few people who has the ability to pull that off convincingly. But I think Roshar has the potential to take over as my favorite world once we get further into the series and have at least the first 5 books. So we'll see. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys hopefully next week, or at least next time.